It all happened the way that it was supposed to. I found out what I needed to know when I needed to know it. At 56, I found out. But look what happened after that. And it's been really good for like a lot of my dad's family and his friends, because now they have me, And so it's like now I have all these new friends that were my dad's friends who are part of my life now. And they care about me and I care about them. And it's just awesome. I never expected that. So it's like, if I can't have him, I have everybody that knew him and also the family that's still there. And that's a lot. It's almost like I'm a whole person now, where I wasn't before.
Welcome to DNA Surprises, a podcast that explores the life-altering world of unexpected DNA discoveries. I'm your host, Alexis Auersalt. This show centers the stories of people who've experienced NPEs, or non-paternal events. In other words, people who've learned that their biological father isn't who they thought he was. We'll also hear from adoptees, donor-conceived people, and the families navigating these discoveries. Get ready to follow the incredible journeys that begin with a simple DNA test. This is DNA Surprises. So much of our identity is wrapped up in the stories we tell ourselves, how we came to be, who our parents are, who our grandparents are, what they did, and how they lived. And for adoptees, many of those details are a mystery. In this week's episode, Barry shares how he discovered his father's incredible story after taking a DNA test. He reveals how learning more about his father created a powerful connection with him. Barry also reveals where things stand and what he has learned about his biological mother. Through it all, he remains focused on his purpose, one that he found by connecting with his father. Just not in the way you might think. Thank you for sharing your story, Barry.
First name is Barry. I'm 58 years old, and I'm from Ormond Beach, Florida. Well, I was adopted, first of all. Just a disclaimer, my adopted parents are the best people in the world ever. They gave me an opportunity that I never would have had. I come from the furthest, most northern city in the state of Maine, which is Eastport. It's right on the Canadian border, and I was born in Bath. What I received was just the most ultimate, unbelievable gift that gave me a life. My dad was a doctor. I grew up in an upper middle class neighborhood of New Jersey. But, I knew from a young age that I was adopted. And so there was just always that, who am I? Where do I come from? The family that adopted me was Jewish, and I grew up in an Italian town, and I looked more like the people in town than I did in my family. I just never felt like I belonged. I never fit in. It's always felt different. And it bothered me, and for a long time. And my parents, unfortunately, didn't know what they were getting. So, what we're talking about here is a lot of stuff. We're talking about, pain and healing. We're talking about genetics. We're talking about, reconnections. We're talking about people's life paths coming together after 56 years. A lot of stuff had happened because of this whole thing. So I had a lot of problems as a kid and kind of straighten out, later in life. But again, I always wanted to know who my parents were. My mother gave me the adoption certificates in my 20s. And so now I had a last name for my mom. And it was really weird because on my birth certificate, they named me Thomas, which was an old family name. I'm like, why would you give somebody up for adoption and name them? So it was really weird. So I tried to find her, right? And there's a lot of stuff that I didn't know. I didn't know that she didn't want me to find her, right? So I looked and looked and looked. I found out that the name was a very old name. Once I did my DNA on my mother's side, it goes all the way back to the 1700s. So I'm really able to trace that lineage, and it's French shipbuilders. And I said my mom didn't want to find me. I had wrote her a letter years ago saying, listen, this is who I am. I turned out okay. You have daughters. If you want to get in touch with me, great. If not, I respect you. And she never did, and it's because of the life that she created and also because of the secret that she had. So in my 20s, I would call every on the phone book, do you know my mom? Do you know my mom? It's like the Dr. Seuss book, right? Do you know my mother? And actually an uncle had answered the phone and he knew who I was because they all knew that she had a child that she gave up for adoption, but she was told not to say anything. So he goes, no, I don't know. So before I did my DNA thing, I actually had my mother's birth side find me. And they reached out to me and they're like, your mother didn't want us to find you because of who she married in her life now. but we decided that we wanted to know you. So I didn't realize that she had 5 brothers and sisters. And so I had all these cousins, I had all these people on her side that really wanted to meet me. And so they found me. And so I found my first blood connection, with relatives, cousins. And so a year later, my wife and I are joking around. And again, I'm thinking that I'm Italian, right? Because I grew up in this Italian town, and I grew up working in pizzerias, and I kind of fit in with them and not really my family. And that's who I wanted to be, that whole fantasy. And so my wife and I are joking around. She's like, "You're not Italian, you're Portuguese." I said, "I'm not Portuguese. I know I'm definitely Italian." So, the whole thing about doing the DNA thing, because I was adopted and because I kind of knew who my mother was and what was wrong, and I knew my background, and I knew the difficulties that I had growing up, I was, tremendously difficult and got in a lot of trouble. And so I'm like, do I really want to know who my dad is? So I finally said, you know what, let's just do it, as a joke to prove to my wife that I wasn't Portuguese. So I did the ancestry. We waited. It came back. Not only was I not Portuguese, but I wasn't Italian either. So I was Scottish, French, and Northern European, the entire family.
How did you feel when you saw that after being so sure that you were Italian?
This felt right. It was funny because years and years ago, somebody said, "Oh, you look dark Irish." I'm like, "Dark Irish? What's dark Irish? Is there such a thing?" But on my father's side, they come from Corker, Ireland, and Corker Castle and that whole thing. So, I finally was able to find all this stuff, Northern European, Scottish, and Irish. And so I was like, wow, that really makes sense, because my mother's family, too, they all came from that whole area from there over to Maine, right? And so, back to my dad, I was floored. All of a sudden, I find out who he is. I see him. And it's really healing because I'm 56, it's just like I had planned on going to Maine so many times, but it never happened. And then I finally found out who I am, and the family reaches out. Not only did I find out who my dad was, but I also found out that he had 3 brothers and 2 sisters, 1 brother still alive, and then my cousins. And then I also found a half brother who has a different, mother with my father. Unfortunately, Tom had passed away in 2000 due to Agent Orange. But I got to learn the whole backstory about him, and then go to his hometown, meet relatives, and actually meet his friends. So in Vietnam, he enlisted when he was 18. And a day before his 19th birthday, December 7th, 1967, he had shipped out in May of 66. He was also, and I say genetics, it's like finding out who my dad was and everything about him really makes sense of all the stuff that I had gone through, because he was a mess. He got in a lot of trouble, even before they sent him to Vietnam, even before he enlisted. And I'll tell you a couple quick stories, but he was in trouble, and they had sent him to the rear away from his company, and he was serving as a cook. And he found out that his company was going into this really bad battle. And his quote was, and I heard this from his lieutenant because I've been in contact with a lot of people since then. This is only about 2 years ago. "Fuck them. They can make their own pork chops. I'm going to help." He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the medal right below the Medal of Honor, the Silver Star. At the end of his tour, he ended up with 2 Bronze Stars, an Air Medal, the Medal of Valor from the Republic of Vietnam, and the Purple Heart. And he re-upped after that, and so that his brother didn't have, he did 2 tours. And he re-upped after that, so his brother didn't have to do. He had over 21 aerial combat missions, and so he did a lot. And it took a toll, my dad he was out there, he was a partier, he was wild. And when he came back, he was affected by it. He was disabled due to shrapnel. He had gotten injured and he couldn't work. But he helped a lot of people. Coming back, he helped a lot of vets. He was a part of a lot of the American Legions, and he really was involved with vets missing in action. One of the guys in his hometown was MIA. And so he really, really stepped out there and used what he did in the Army and his medals to help, with families in the search for guys that are MIA, and then also current guys that really needed services through the VA. And so I found all this out, and it was just flooring to me. And it was healing because I finally knew who my father was, and I knew who I was, and I had pride now, knowing how much alike we were, and knowing the things that he did, And then we decided to take a trip. And so this is where it gets really crazy. Not only finding out that stuff, but this also loops in my mother's side of the family too. So we decided last year to go up, and we're going to meet my uncle and some other relatives. Well, not only did I have a stepbrother, but I also had a stepsister, and the stepsister is kind of ostracized by the family. The stepsister wasn't really a good person and did a lot of bad things to my dad. And I won't get into the gory details, but let's just say nobody really will or wants to have anything to do with her based on some of the things that she did. And one of the things that she did is when she died, she sold his medals. And the family thought they were gone. Nobody knew. I mean, and he died in 2000. Well, what happened was we went up there and I met some of my birth relatives from my mother's side. We had a party in Orr Island. We had a lobster party, and I met that uncle. And he said, I'm sorry I didn't tell you this at the time, but your mother told us not to. Right? He goes, but I later found out that my father wasn't even my father. So he goes, now I kind of know how you feel. And it was just like, I was welcomed in by the rest of my mother's family. Unfortunately, she decided, not to. And it's because of, like I said, there was a secret. So this is the other story behind my adoption. My mother and her sister wanted to get out of Bath, and they were looking for a ticket. Well, back in the 60s, there was a doctor and a lawyer in Bath that had a thing going. They were adopting kids in that area to rich, affluent families in Boston, okay? And so her and her sister came up with this scheme that they got in touch with this doctor and this lawyer, and basically, if they were able to give up children for adoption, then they were going to have the means to be able to leave. And they both got pregnant within 6 months. They both delivered at the same hospital, and both named their kid the same, just in case anybody came looking. Just
so
to kind of
like almost like a not a surrogacy, because there wasn't a family who had contacted them, but essentially they got pregnant with the intent to
basically got hired. Yeah. Wow. This doctor and this lawyer, where they were adopting kids out to these rich families. And so any women that came to them, they took care of them. My mother and her sister were working at a bar, the bar that was right outside the base that my dad shipped out of. So they had met as he was shipping off her over there, and he was the good-looking, lucky guy that got to meet my mom that night. And that was her ticket out. And she went to Reno, never looked back, got married, had a family. And
so he had no knowledge of you.
He had no knowledge of me, but she did. Right. And she didn't want her current family to know
that she had done that. So
yes.
Do you think...
And I respected that. I'm not going to interfere with her life.
Do you think that it's like a shame-based feeling of why she doesn't want to meet you? Do you think that she feels detached, almost like she was a surrogate and you were never meant to be hers, and so she just doesn't...
She didn't want her married family to find out the story behind how she exited Maine with her sister. She married into an affluent, prominent family, worked in the government, and were highly religious, and so didn't want this coming out. And so I wasn't going to push it. I wasn't going to, I didn't have any, I was grateful. She gave me life. If she didn't do what she did, I never would have had the opportunities that I had. So I always respected that.
Did your adoptive parents know about this?
No. My adoptive parents were told that they were college kids, unprepared and ready for children. So
they bought into a story.
Yeah, it was a lot.
And were they supportive of you finding your birth parents, or how did they feel about it?
It's funny. It's like I'm really grateful for the childhood and the family that I was given. I didn't have a close relationship with my father or my brother. I did have a very close relationship with my mother, and she always supported me up until the time she died. So my mom and my adopted mom and I were very, very close, always. And I'm close with my dad now more than I was, but we didn't gel. We never did. I was never fully accepted. I always felt like, I was the black sheep.
You seem sort of excited and energized by what you learned about your biological father.
Yep.
So was there any moment, like learning this about your biological mother, where maybe it was hard to process this information because you believed this story, right? That they were young college kids and they weren't ready.
Oh, I never believed that story.
Oh, you never did?
No,
okay.
I never believed that story.
What did you think?
Didn't know. And it's funny because what I thought, you have these crazy ideas in your head of like who your parents are. So I thought that it was probably my dad that was the bad guy and my mom was the compassionate one. I got my compassion and my caring from my mother, and I got the anger and the bad boy stuff from my dad. Well, I did get some of that from my dad, but it was more my mom who really, what I found out later about really who she was, that she really wasn't that nice of a person, unfortunately. And this is coming from her family. And so I'm not trashing her. It's just what I've been told about her, because the rest of the family decided, we're not listening to you. We see this guy on Facebook. We see the life he's creating. We see his daughters. We see what kind of person he is. And we want to meet him. And so my first cousin reached out to me, and my other second or third cousin reached out. And then my mother's sister's son, reached out to me. And then a year later, we're up having a party, and I'm being welcomed by the majority of her side of the family. At that point, I didn't need my mother's approval or vindicate. You know what I mean? I didn't need that piece anymore. I understand who she was, and I understand why she did what she did, and I accepted it, and I don't have any resentments or hard feelings over it. I'm just grateful that I was able to meet, the rest of the family, and that they wanted to meet me, and I would have respected them if they didn't. But after meeting them, the crazy story is I went to visit my Uncle Billy, who now has Parkinson's. And I was able to, his other brothers and sisters had passed. So he was the only brother left, my father's brother, Billy. We're in Eastport now, and Eastport is just an amazing little small town USA, right on the water in this deep port. I mean, it's the coolest little town you've ever seen. And 4th of July is huge there. So we were up there for the 4th of July. And we were staying for about 5 days, and I'm going to meet my brother too. So I met Bill, and I met his kids. I met 3 of my cousins. And then the next day I was going to meet my brother, who looks just like me, as well. And he grew up with my father, and so did my sister. Well, the next morning after we met them, I get a call from Bill's wife, Paula, saying, your dad's friends contacted us about a week ago, and they wanted to do something special to honor him. And they know a guy named Don who might have an idea of where your dad's medals are. And this is all happening while we're there. And he goes, we're going to call them, and maybe we can go over there and meet him. And I said, yeah, we can go down to Bangor. I can stop there on our way to the airport. And so they found him. This one guy knew another guy who from the American Legion found out who bought the medals that were sold, because my father gave the medals to his girlfriend who had them for 10 years. And then she felt that in some way they should go back. And so she sent them to the American Legion post that he was a part of in Maine about 5 or 10 years ago. The American Legion post closed, so they didn't know what to do with them. And so they found the stepsister, his daughter, and they gave him to her. Well, she immediately sold them, and she sold them to a coin and metal dealer. And well, this one gentleman who contacted my aunt to want to do something for my dad contacted another guy who knew the guy that may have had him, and now we're driving down on the last day, getting ready to fly out, and we show up, and he has the medals. And I meet 2 couples, both my dad's friends. One of them was one of my dad's ex-girlfriends. And when we were walking up to the store, she cried. She saw me and she cried because they didn't know anything about me, but I looked just like them. And this guy, this is how God works. This is serendipity. He bought them, but he didn't break them up and sell them. He kept them intact in case at some point in time, somebody from the family, he would be able to return them and give them back, along with a certificate that my father received when he was inaugurated into the Legion of Valor by Congress in 1990. And all of us are in there, and it's emotional, and they knew my dad, and now they're meeting me. And day before I met my brother, he gives me my dad's flag from his military funeral. And he says to me, he goes, the oldest son should have this. And the 2 bullets that they fired when they had the service. And so we took them home with us. And then I had them all framed together, all the medals with the Legion of Valor certificate in the middle and the flag on top, with the Purple Heart on the flag and his name on the bottom with the bullets. One of the things that I have been able to do for my dad, a lot of his friends wanted him to get upgraded to the Medal of Honor. The 3-star general in the field could have issued the Medal of Honor. My dad actually requested it right before he passed. He died of a brain tumor. He had Agent Orange. He had a throat cancer. And he had a tumor in the brain, and then he ended up dying of a stroke. But he petitioned for it, and they said, well, the 3-star general could have given you at the time, but the Distinguished Service Cross holds a lot of weight. But I really felt like he should, being the second highly decorated, veteran in the state of Maine, that he should have a place somewhere, because he didn't have a marker in the Eastport Cemetery, right? And so right now, I'm waiting for one certificate that's being mailed out to me, and they're going to put him in Arlington.
Wow.
And so then they schedule the service, and it takes about a year. So Uncle Bill and my cousins, all his friends that are still alive, still know him. So they're going to all come down for the ceremony at Arlington.
Oh, that's amazing. And I imagine just hearing all of that made you feel closer to him. A lot of the things that come up for people who have had these DNA discoveries is those what ifs and kind of that longing, especially after somebody has passed. Do you have questions for him that you want to ask? I mean, I know we can't dwell too much on the what ifs of it all, but what's still there for you?
I have no questions. Like my dad's a part of me now. You know what I mean? It's like he might have passed, but I see him and I say prayers every morning and he's part of them and we communicate to each other and I know he's there. He's in my heart. It's almost like I didn't get to meet him physically, but we connected. Like once he found me, his medals found me. Once this all came to me, my dad found me and he's a part of me, and I know him. And I know the good of him and I know the difficulties of him. There's a lot of genetics going on in that family, like alcoholism and drug addiction on both sides of that family. And those are the things that I struggled with. And so that's really part of my life today. I struggle with that in my life. I ended up working in that field and I run a nonprofit. And one of our programs and one of our missions now is to open up a veterans-only sober house in Jacksonville that helps veterans with PTSD. My dad struggled with substance abuse and PTSD. And so it's almost like everything that I've been trained for, everything that I went through and experienced in my life, everything kind of like brought me to that DNA story. And then that DNA story has brought me to my purpose now.
And were you doing all of this like addiction and recovery work
before,
prior to discovering him? So you were already kind of on the serendipity of it all.
Yeah. I already had our nonprofit. We were already doing work in the field. I was already working with trauma groups in drug courts, and I was already doing a lot of stuff within the community. Prior to that, I was a certified addiction professional years earlier. I worked in rehabs and I worked for drug court and I did other things. I got my doctorate and I got my MBA and I thought I was going to teach. And then I'm like, no, I need to get back. And so that's when I created the foundation and we started doing this work. And so now we have this umbrella foundation that's uniquely set up to really now be able to start this program. There's 75% really overlaps with PTSD and substance abuse with veterans. And so, like my dad gave back to veterans. And so I'm going to use his story and what he did to really reach out and promote the mission of Second Mission. And I'm so grateful for that because, it's almost like I found him and I found my purpose and it was his purpose. And I'm a veteran too. And so now, we can really kind of do this together.
If people are curious and want to learn more about your nonprofit, where can they find you?
Veteran Sober House, veteransoberhouse.org. Second Mission Veteran Sober House.
Okay. You said that you grew up very close with your mother, who raised you, not as close with your father and brother, but you said you're closer to your dad now. What does he think of all this?
He's interested. You got to be really delicate. So, like my mom passed years ago. My mom's not here anymore. My father's going to be 90 in a couple of days, and I'm 58. So as we've grown older, it's become easier. I'm not the crazy son that I used to be. I've stabilized and really gone the other way. And so he's really proud of that. We don't talk about it a lot, but I did tell him what I had found, and he found it interesting, and he thought that it was good. So it's nice that he has some acceptance of that now. We were just always different people. We're just very different. And it was just hard for them. I was very outgoing, the camping, hunting kind of guy. And they were like, the math kind of guy. We just were different. And it's, but as a kid, you don't understand that,
Sure. Did he have any reaction to the reality of your adoption circumstances?
He didn't say anything. You could just kind of tell by his expression that it kind of probably answered some questions for him. Really, unfortunately, they really didn't know what they were getting themselves into. I was a terror as a kid, in school, in my early teens, in my early 20s. I got in a lot of trouble. I was a lot like my dad, had those genetics. And it's funny because, it's so much like him because now I'm able to hear true stories from cousins who were around him a lot as kids. And now they're older. And just to hear the things, it's just so similar. It's crazy. And not only looks, but sometimes you get like the personality of one and the looks of the other. It's just like, I got all of him, and for better or worse.
Yeah. You do so much work around addiction and recovery and support for veterans. Do you have any thoughts on adoption and like adoption policies and things like that, because a lot of people who have been through similar stories to your own are in the adoption advocacy space. So I'm curious on how that's affected you.
Oh, I'm always for adoption. In fact, I was always planning on adopting myself. I ended up having 2 daughters. It just never was in the cards for me, but I really wanted to. And it's just like now it's pretty cool because now I'm able to work with so many people. It's almost like I'm adopting them, but I think that it's a shame that they weren't told the truth. You wonder if a lot of these children would have gotten adopted. But I mean, I really kind of thought that it was a business for them. You know what I mean?
So they were making,
they were making money, off of, people's, in a desperate area in a desperate time. If I had grown up knowing who I was, if I had grown up like in an orphanage in that area, I would have turned out a lot even worse than I already was. I mean, I think, say in addiction and in recovery, we tell our stories. And I always say that they saved my life, not just because they adopted me, but because of the area that I grew up in and the love that they gave me. And I had food and I was safe and they were nurturing. I wasn't necessarily super close with them, but I mean, I was still very cared for. And that touched me. That changed me. And it probably turned out, even though I was still difficult and still got in trouble, it would have been a lot worse hadn't I gotten all that. So nature nurture, I mean, the nurturing that I got definitely saved my life and really helped, I'm sure, develop me into the person with the values, the core values, and the character that I was brought up to know and understand. Saved my life and gave me a chance. So they gave me more chances than just the adoption. And so I'm really grateful for that. I would always want a child to get adopted instead of, being, the alternative,
Yeah.
But there should be transparency.
That's what I was going to say. I guess my question is maybe around reform in adoption. As you said, it was sort of a business. So, if you had any thoughts around that.
And I don't know what it's like now to adopt somebody. I mean, I don't know what the vetting process is or what the transparency is. You would think that it was better in the late 60s up there. I mean, not just the late 60s, it was the entire 60s because a lot of kids got adopted by this lawyer and this doctor. That was probably just the Wild West. They were just doing what they wanted to do. There was all these kids. There was getting pregnant. There was nothing really to do up there. It was rural, desperate, area. You built ships. It snowed and you drank. So at least maybe they were making money, but at least they were giving these kids the opportunity because they knew they were going to good families. So maybe that's how they justified it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they were also, getting the kids that they got.
Right. You kind of talked about what's next and hopefully getting to lay your father to rest in Arlington. And you've talked about how your connection has grown a bit more with your adoptive father. Sounds like the path with your mother is closed off for now and not something that you're going to pursue. I'm curious, just overall, how this experience has affected or transformed you.
It's healed me. It's healed me. It's like you spend a good part of your life not knowing who you are, where you come from, who your people are. Why were you given up? Why weren't you wanted? Are you wanted? Is there somebody looking for you? All these questions. It all happened the way that it was supposed to. I found out what I needed to know when I needed to know it. At 56, I found out. But look what happened after that. And it's been really good for like a lot of my dad's family and his friends because now they have me, And so it's like now I have all these new friends that were my dad's friends who are part of my life now. And they care about me and I care about them. And it's just awesome. I never expected that. So it's like, if I can't have him, I have everybody that knew him and also the family that's still there. And that's a lot. It's almost like I'm a whole person now where I wasn't before. It's also really good because I think at the time, if it happened when I was a little bit younger, it would have gone differently. But because I'm a little bit more mature, I'm really able to accept everything and really be open to the entire experience and really then try and use it for whatever good I can. It's been really fun and interesting for my family, my wife and my kids, and all of my friends that know me. It's God working in my life, and I'm just so grateful,
That's amazing.
For that. Yeah.
All right. Well, my last 2 questions that I ask everyone, and I'll probably tweak them a little bit for your scenario, but the first question is, what advice do you have for a parent, or in your case, maybe a birth parent who's going to relinquish their child for adoption, but maybe keeping the circumstances a secret? What advice would you have for those people?
I would say don't hold anything back. I mean, it goes back to the conversation I had with my parents. And what really affected me is I found out that I was adopted at a very young age. I was in second grade. And that kind of messed my head up. I think that I was really too young to be told at that time. But as I got a little bit older, I told my parents, I said, I need to find them. I need to find, what answers that I can, but it has nothing to do with you. It's no reflection on you. I love you. I'm so grateful you're my parents. You're always being parents. I'm not trying to replace you. Just understand I have this need to kind of know, and kind of understand. So knowing that as a parent, if you're getting ready to go for a kid up for adoption, they may want to know. But it's also the parents' right. Like, it's also my mother's right. When I wrote her that letter, I said, this is who I am. I just want you to let you know that I turned out okay. I have kids. This is who I am. This is what I'm doing. If you want to get a hold of me, man, I would love that. That'd be great. But if not, I respect that. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, she probably wasn't in a position to really have a child, right? And so regardless of the circumstances, she did decide to do a very selfless thing and to give up her son. So that's a huge sacrifice.
What advice do you have for someone who just uncovered a DNA surprise or a DNA discovery?
I think you have to make that decision before you get the results. You have to really be able to ready whatever, the circumstances are. In my case, it turned out to be more good than bad, but you do hear stories where it doesn't turn out, positive. I hate to give advice, but how I look at it for me personally is I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful that I was adopted. I'm grateful to have what I have. In the event that it didn't go the way that I wanted to, or that I found information that was disturbing, I would have to accept it and just know that that's not me, that's them. And maybe it was better in that case that I didn't know them or didn't meet them or that I wasn't raised by them. But at least I know, you know what I mean? And it doesn't have to be public information. Everybody else doesn't have to know about it, but just be willing to accept my connection. I can have some peace with it, and at least you can find out who you are.
That's good advice. Awesome. Well, Barry, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story. I'm so glad that you've been able to connect with the people who want you in their lives on your mom's side, and that you've made these amazing connections on your father's side and gotten to learn so much about him. Please keep me posted on how things go with Arlington. That's such an incredible story and journey and thing that you're doing for him. So thank you, and I wish you the best.
Thanks. And Alexis, thank you and what you're doing, because, really being able to tell the story, put it out there that it may help somebody else. I know that it is. I've listened to the other podcasts. This is life, and this is really an important thing that people go through, and so we do need to come together and to share that. So thank you for, allowing me to be part of that and what you're doing and part of the story. So thank you so much.
Thanks again to Barry for sharing his story. If you'd like to learn more about Barry's work, I've included links in the show notes. If you have a DNA surprise that you'd like to share, please submit your story at dnasurprises.com. And for early ad-free access to episodes, join me over on Patreon at patreon.com/DNA Surprises. Until next time. DNA Surprises is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Alexis Auersalt. It is mixed and mastered by Josh Auersalt of Siren Recording Studios.